It is a brand new episode of Flyers Daily for the 11th of August, 2025. Flyers Daily, as usual, brought to you by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Lots to discuss. You wouldn't think so this time of year. The hockey community is kind of asleep at the cottage, but joining us from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyHotStove.com, it is Bill Meltzer back stateside, back from Ireland. How was the trip with the Flyers alumni?
The trip was amazing. You know, I didn't even bring it up last time we did, but it was a big family thing, right? A lot of the alumni brought their wives. John LeClaire and Mark Recchi came with their sons, so it was a father-son thing.
Oh, that's awesome!
It was such a good time, you know, and back to adjust to the time change and all that, but that was worth every minute. It was incredible.
How was the response to, Flyers alumni over in Ireland? Because, we think of this game a lot of times on North American terms, U.S. and Canada. We know it's an international sport, but how were they kind of recognized in Ireland? Ireland, not one of the hockey powerhouses on the planet.
No, it's not. Actually met someone there. They were talking about how they're into Gaelic football and hurling. And, they described hurling as a cross between field hockey and murder. I like that description. But actually, some of the guys got recognized on the last night. There's a pub right nearby, the resort we stayed at, and there was a family there from Canada. They recognized John LeClaire, Mark Recchi, and there were actually some people there traveling from the States. They had Eagles shirts on, but they recognized the alumni. So that was pretty cool.
Very cool. I mean, you look like a guy like Mark Recchi. I mean, if you're any sort of hockey fan, you know who Rex is because because he played so long, and B, he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame and deservedly so.
Exactly.
I'm really glad he's back in the fold around here, Bill. I love having him around. I know he's got some experience coaching, and obviously he played with Rick Tocchet. Could you see him ended up back behind a bench in some capacity?
That'll be up to Rex. I know his name was kicked around when they were considering a power play coach for Talk because Rex had done it before with a couple of teams, and he
played a lot of power play too.
Not bad on the power play,
yeah.
But he wasn't anxious to just jump right back into coaching. I think he's liking what he's doing right now, but ultimately, I think at some point the bug will bite him again, and he'll want to do it. I mean, he's such a smart hockey guy that he's an asset to any organization if he wants to do that. So I think at some point he probably might.
You got to be a smart hockey guy when at his size, you're able to do what he did in the league. And for so long, in a lot of the years that he played, it was a really heavy, tough game. I mean, all said and done, he only played 1,652 games.
That's it, yeah.
I mean, it's incredible.
And a guy who, wasn't drafted at 18. He was drafted
at 19.
Yeah, he came along late. Came along later than most players. Small guy, as you said. Not the fat. I mean, he had the oddest skating style, if you remember.
Very compact.
Very, very compact skating style. He looked more like he was running on skates than gliding.
Yeah.
But it worked for him. And watching Rex is always a treat. And such a good offensive player. But he could play either wing without blinking an eye. And there's a reason why he won 3 cups. I know Mark wishes there'd been a 4th in Philly because he played more games as a Flyer than any other franchise, but fully deserving his spot in the Hall of Fame and a really good down-to-earth guy on top of all that.
No doubt. Do you know he only had 1 playoff overtime goal?
That's wild,
It was as a Flyer.
Yeah.
It was back in 2003 against Toronto
in
the 3rd overtime.
Yeah. Yeah, thank goodness, because there were so many games in that series that went overtime, and that triple overtime game was ultimately how the Flyers pulled out that series. So
that's you look at his just stats. I mean, first of all, you just keep scrolling. You keep seeing season after season. Debuted in '88 and retired in 2011.
Wild.
I mean, that's insane.
Wild. Yeah.
He spans generations. Kind of what I want to talk about in this episode, Bill. Eagles started their preseason. I've been thinking about the Eagles a lot and Howie Roseman lately, and thinking about Danny Briere and the Flyers, and getting the the building back to the place to be, where it's the in thing to be into the Flyers again. And look, that takes work. And I know sometimes for a lot of fans, and I was talking to somebody that it was only like 23 years old, and I said, the Flyers just haven't won enough in my lifetime. And I thought about that. And I was like, wow, that's crazy, because this person was born in 2002. And while they had some decent runs in that time, it hasn't been like my life and your life, where year in, year out, the Flyers are poised for a run. And in the league, if there was a big name out there, damn it, they went out and got that player. Sometimes it wasn't the right decision, but they were always in the mix. And I get why this younger generation feels sometimes, that being a Flyers fan is more of maybe a curse or a sentence than it is an enjoyable gift given to us by the geography in which we were born. But hopefully Danny Briere's got him on the right track in doing that, and not rushing things, popping anything into the microwave is a good start.
For sure, because when you arrive there, you don't want it just to be a one done kind of thing, right? I thought in 2020, the pandemic year, because if you remember that year, not only did the Flyers end up being just one win away from the conference final, but that year before the pandemic stopped the season, the Flyers were, I think, 7th in goals for and 7th in goals against. Usually, if you're in the top third in there, that's something you can sustain for a while. And so I thought that at that point they had turned a corner, but obviously it ended up being an illusion because it didn't last even a year. And then before that, there was the stretch. One year they'd make the playoffs, lose in the first round. Next year they'd miss the playoffs. Next year they'd make the playoffs, lose in the first. That's not that's not how you sustain anything with a fan base or build confidence. So you have to do it the right way, where when you arrive, you're there to stay for a while. This is an important year. So, I don't think any of us have the illusion this team is going to contend for a cup. However, I think if things break the right way, the Flyers could be a surprise team. Every year there are teams that get written off by the so-called experts. Look at Washington last year. They said, oh well, they backed into the playoffs the year before that, and that was kind of their last gasp, and look at where they finished in the conference last year.
And the moves weren't sexy that they made in the offseason. Chikrin's a nice move. They bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois on a third chance kind of thing, and it just worked out.
Exactly. And so, now it looks like they might be there for a while, even as Alex Ovechkin is winding down and whatever. I don't see a reason why, if things go right, because there are a lot of things that have to go right, and we've talked about some of those things, and we'll continue to. I don't see if things go right, why the Flyers could not get into a playoff spot this year. Again, I don't see them going far unless they upset somebody, but hopefully they take that next step to where they arrive, and then it doesn't become a question of,
are you a playoff team?
Yeah, I don't want to be talking lottery odds by March, by February or March, every year on an ongoing basis. It's and I think we're all tired of seasons being done by April 15th too. So I do think that they've taken positive steps towards getting there, but the proof is in the pudding, right? They have to get there, have to take that next step, and then take the next step after that. But I do think there's an approach and an avenue where they can do that. But again, that has to be proven first.
Yeah, Bill, one of the reasons why the fan base kind of lost confidence over that period of time, since going to the Cup in 2010, and then every other year it was win 10 games, not make the playoffs, lose 10 games, make the playoffs, but get bounced in the first round. It all became very predictable because there just wasn't. And then you got 1920. They go out, and obviously they didn't have Nolan Patrick. They knew that wasn't going to be the case with his migraine issues. They go out, they overpay for Kevin Hayes. Yeah. And I think they got their money's worth in year 1 and 2. But then you also signed Tyler Pitlick and Matt Niskanen. A global pandemic happens. Niskanen calls it a career. Pitlick is Pitlick, but that team by the underlying numbers was good. But again, it became very fleeting. And the way to build confidence is an ascension of an arc. and they just never caught a wave that they could sustain. They were like bouncing on the wave, trying to get it to ride it further, but they just weren't going anywhere.
No, for sure. And where I think that there's an avenue here is that Michkov is the kind of player you build around, right? Hopefully, obviously, he'll play college hockey this year, but the year after that should be in the NHL. I think Porter Martone might be the kind of player you can build around. And once you have your nucleus pieces in place, then it becomes a little bit easier. I mean, there are still obvious needs, like a true 1C and a true first number one defenseman, because I think the surrounding cast is pretty decent. But those are obviously big gaps that still need to be filled. But at least I think they're starting to bring in players that can be those nucleus guys you can build around, and it has to happen too, because guys like Travis Konechny are they're still in their prime, but they're getting later in their prime. So you have to have guys that can be the lead dogs moving forward. Honestly, Jason, I think the biggest mistake, and I remember early episodes of Flyers Daily with Mondays with Meltzer, where we were talking about, okay, the Flyers have to have a succession plan for Claude Giroux. They had to have a succession plan for Jake Voracek. They had, et cetera.
Wayne Simmons
and Wayne Simmer. And there were players they were hopeful for that didn't pan out. And honestly, I think that was a big part of why they ended up in the cycle they've ended up in. But I think now there's an opportunity to actually have guys that can be the guys who lead the way moving forward. But there still need to be more of that, and they will need they'll definitely need some breaks to go their way too. But I feel better about the team right now than I would have, say, 2 years ago, sitting here having the same discussion.
I totally agree, and I thought it was fascinating. And I talked about this on an episode last week when you were in Ireland. About the Athletic, Kevin Kerr's column in the Athletic with the fan survey, and look, It wasn't a chump change, survey group. It's 2,000 people.
Yeah,
it's quite large, right? I mean, that should be pretty accurate with a number of participants that high. And there were two things that really stuck out to me: is that 80% of the respondents had Danny Briere's grade as the general manager as a B or higher. 87%. I mean, we haven't seen that kind of optimism in a long time with a man making the decisions. And then the other one was that just extending Travis Konechny to his contract. 77% of the respondents there said they agreed with extending him. If you went by Twitter and the vocal minority, I thought it would be the exact opposite of that when it came to Travis Konechny.
No, absolutely, and I do think that we could fall in that trap sometimes. As to, because a lot of times it's the people who are disgruntled who are the loudest on things.
Yep.
And honestly, it goes back a long time, Jason. I can go back to the teams in the mid '90s where if you would have, anybody who had any positivity on, by the way, a contending team that reached the cup final or whatever, but you would think anybody that said anything positive about the Flyers were so-called Stepford fans, not realizing that the team was basically one piece away, from potentially going over the top. But I mean that was the vocal group, and that was before social media and whatnot. But that was really during the heyday of talk radio. So I think it's kind of always been that way. But I do think that honestly, nothing's a better deodorizer than success, than winning. Because once you win and you get the fan base as a whole on your side, then Philly is the best place to play, the best place to cover a team. Honestly,
yeah. Talks mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
I was talking about the 23-year-old guy that I was talking to that hadn't seen enough success.
Yeah.
It kind of in the gut of my life, from the time I was 11 to the time I was 36, the team had no team in Philadelphia won a championship. It was 25 years, essentially, even though there was a couple of lockout years there, but that's essentially 100 sports seasons in a 4-for-4 city without a parade.
Yeah.
And frankly, a lot of the teams just didn't go to finals very often. The Phillies go to the finals in '93 kind of out of nowhere with that John Kruk and Dykstra and Dutch and all those guys. And then, there you go. You cue Joe Carter, who hits the home run to break your heart in 93. Then the Eagles go at the end of the 04 season to the Super Bowl with T.O. gets hurt, but he comes back for the Super Bowl. They end up losing to the Patriots. There's Andy Reid and Donovan McNabb coming up small for you. 01 Sixers were unbelievable that year. 42-14 when Theo Ratliff got hurt.
Yeah.
They go into the finals, win game 1, and then get bounced in 5 by Shaq and Kobe. Right. And then the Phillies, of course, end the curse in 2008. But the Flyers in that time had gone to since they won the Cup, they went to the final 6 times. But since 83 and the Sixers winning it, they went in 85 and 87 against the Oilers team who won 5 and 7 years. 97, they lose to the Red Wings, who sweep them. Yeah. And Detroit wins 3 cups in 6 years. Blackhawks win 3 cups in 6 years in 2010. 25 years, no parade, but a lot of winning in there.
No, the Flyers, besides the finals in 97 and 2010, they made the conference finals in it was 89, in 95, in 2000, in 2004. That's a lot of times where you have a potential trip to the finals.
2004 is, that's Tampa. That's Game 7. Keith Primo.
Game 7 in Jersey. They had the 3-1 lead in the series.
Yeah. And Lindros comes back.
Lindros came back. They lost the game 2-1. They lost another game 2-1.
Oh.
That cost them the series. And both of those years, but I think especially in 2004, I look back to 2004. If the Flyers beat Tampa in Game 7,
they beat Calgary.
They would have beaten Calgary. I think they would have beaten Calgary in 5. Honestly, they were a much better team than the Flames were. So it just how it goes. We can cry over it, but by the same token, I look at other franchises. When Chicago beat the Flyers in 2010. That ended their own 49-year drought, right?
They were wearing bags over their heads at the games. Their games weren't locally televised. Their hockey team was in a horrible spot just 5 years earlier.
Before Kane and Tays.
Yeah.
And Duncan Keith. And Duncan Keith is a good example of a guy who wasn't a first-round pick, but became a top-level, elite-level defenseman in the league. Yeah.
Critical player.
You need some of that on your team where you have Seabrook was another critical guy. Patrick Sharp goes from the Flyers as a little bit of an underachieving prospect. They were able to fit him in the lineup because they didn't have much there, and he blossoms and becomes an all-star there. They had a lot of things go right for them. But I was saying, like with other franchises, we talk about Toronto having not been to a final, not winning the cup, but haven't been to the final since '67.
Since the league was 16.
Yeah. Vancouver's been around since '70. They've never won a cup. Buffalo's been around since '70. They've never won a cup. The Rangers went from 1940 to 1994 and haven't won another one since then. So it's one cup in 85 years.
Wow.
It's that's just kind of how it goes. In baseball, look how the Cubs went. The Cubs went over 100 years.
Yeah, and obviously Boston too.
Yeah, between Babe Ruth and then finally getting over the hump. So all I can say is, because we can't say when it will be, but when it happens eventually, it'll be the sweet thing. Let's hope we're around to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But but it's the nature of sports. When you realize that's the nature of sports, and hockey particularly being a sport where it gets prone to long droughts, when it happens, just enjoy the hell out of it, because you don't know when it's going to be again. But that doesn't mean there haven't been a lot of missteps, but there's been a lot of bad luck too.
I think
good enough to win.
I think you have to identify those missteps so you don't repeat them.
100%.
Absolutely. And you got to look at them, and just organizationally, you've got to own it. Even though, it wasn't Danny Briere that made the decision to sign Ilya Bryzgalov, or it wasn't, a bad trade here or a bad trade. It's not, it's a culmination of all those, but I think you got to recognize all of them and not hide from it.
Yeah.
I really kind of picked my brain And it turned out to be an easier exercise than I thought, Bill. But I came up with 5 key elements that Danny Briere, Keith Jones, and Dan Hilferty need to really get the Flyer fan base from, kind of the scorned ex-lover back into the place to be in Philadelphia. And I think parts of this are on the ice and parts of it are off the ice as well. The first one is really simple, and it's just win more hockey games. Just win more. This fan base wants to buy in with something that's that's predictable in its in good results than predictable in bad.
Yeah, for sure. That's certainly, again, that's the great deodorizer, right? It is winning. Yeah. Because then a lot of things get forgiven. It's and the nature of sports in general is, what have you done for me lately? So when you've succeeded and you have I think before that comes the promise year, where you can feel it coming.
Yeah.
I remember that really, really well during the 95 lockout year, where the Flyers had missed the playoffs 5 straight years, and kind of got off to a bad start that year. And then the Legion of Doom came together, and all of a sudden they're in the conference final against the Devils, but you knew you'd be back.
Yeah. You're like, whoa, we got something here.
We've got something. It's a young team, a big team, an exciting team, and you felt you could see it, you could feel it, right? And it was 2 years later, they did get swept in the finals by Detroit, which was a very disappointing outcome after they took only 15 games to get there. Right,
and were heavily favored when they got there.
They were heavily favored getting there, and they just well, as Terry Murray put it was a choking situation. I mean, Detroit didn't win back-to-back cups for nothing, but that should have been a lot better series than it was.
Yeah.
But at any rate, you have that year where you don't go all the way, or you don't even get to a final, but you feel like, okay, we've arrived.
Yeah.
I think we're waiting for that year with the Flyers, where you go, okay, we've hit that next level, and now it's a question of putting those pieces together that will help you at some point, hopefully, get over the top. If you remember, after that year, I mean, the Flyers went out and they spent money in free agency back before the cap, but they identified what they needed. They got guys like Joel Otto, for example, who was a big help. They signed Peter Swoboda to an extension. Rather than letting him walk by free agency, and he was a very underrated defenseman for a number of years with the team, and that was really a big part too of why they were able to stay there in contention for a while. I think we're waiting for that year with this team where they show signs of taking that next step. Let's hope that happens within the next couple of years.
Yeah, if not this year, it's that feeling of like when you met a new girl in high school and you really liked her and you felt it in your belly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get this tinge in your belly when you thought about it. And it's just an excitement. There's an endorphin that comes with that excitement, which brings me to the next one, because you mentioned it with 95, and then obviously Legion of Doom coming together, and that team played an exciting brand of hockey. I mean, they went out there and they played hard. They had skill. When I look for I think it's key for this team to play an exciting brand of hockey. Sometimes winning hockey for some teams is kind of boring the way they play.
Yeah.
But I think, to get everybody back on is to play an exciting brand of hockey. And I think they got a great guy to do it with Mishkov. I think the Panthers, the way they play, is a really exciting, proud way to play the game. I think you can look back in your DNA of the history of your franchise and honor it. But incorporate it into where the game is today. And I think this fan base would eat that up if the success is part of it.
No question in my mind that, and with all due respect to the Keenan's Kids guys and the Broad Street Bullies guys, you can't sell those guys at this point, right? You have to sell a style that's going to work. Well, one of the big mistakes in retrospect, where the Flyers came close those number of years and then it didn't quite get over the hump. I think they made the mistake of trying to win last year's cup rather than next year's cup.
Yeah.
They were okay. Well, the Devils trapped them to death, right? and so they tried to adjust to that. I mean, it always felt like they were going backwards a year or 2 years.
Step behind,
yeah. Rather than being proactive and being ahead of the curve of what's coming next. So while I would love for the Flyers to be able to emulate what Florida did, because what Florida has there, obviously, is they have a ton of talent and a ton of depth, but they have something that works for that group.
Yep. I think emulating them is very difficult.
It's
the rarity.
It's very hard to do. Yeah, like I don't think it's very easy to put together a team that can play that way and succeed.
Yeah.
You could look at what tends to succeed in the playoffs. I mean, the whole league in general is getting big again. If you look at the Flyers draft this year, they certainly put a premium on size, but the guys who are really the unicorns, the gold standard in today's games, aren't just the big guys. It's the guys who are also big, but they can also skate.
Yeah,
and they have a skill level too, and that, I mean, if you can get those guys, and to me you can surround some of that. There's still room in the league for guys who aren't the fastest skater. There's room in the league for guys that are on the small side, but I don't think you can have too many of them. I think that you look at the general type of player that you need to win, and then you can surround them with some of those pieces. So I think that there's something to learn from where the teams that, well, obviously Florida's there, but other teams too. Look at what Tampa did, and again, they got lucky with some non-first round picks too. But there are reasons. There are things they did beyond that, or why they were able to stay near the top or at the top for a prolonged period of time. I think the Flyers are still looking for exactly what works for them, but I think they have an idea of where they want to get to. Whereas before, I felt like they were kind of chasing their tails a little bit.
Yeah.
And hopefully that can start to come together. They can get some of those guys.
I think a huge thing in today's game when building a roster is to not have redundancy.
Exactly.
I think redundancy is a killer for these teams in a salary cap league. But obviously, going on a playoff run makes my list, and everybody gets the flags on the cars and the wearing shorts to a hockey, and that's great. But I think another thing that's really key, and this goes to Dan Hilferty and hockey operations, frankly, everybody and the players, is to expose the players beyond just what we see on the ice. I go back to 2010 when Peter Laviolette in the Winter Classic, or 2012, I guess it was, the road to the Winter Classic, when people got to see what he was like.
Yeah.
I think exposing players as people, not just hockey players, also, I think deepens the grip of fandom in a lot of ways. I think part of my job is to do that, as a guy here on the podcast. And, but I think that's a key thing, to have everybody bought in on that. Like, look, we're selling a product here, and they're not just hockey players; they're people.
100%, and it has to be done, obviously, in the way that's done today, right? If you go all the way back, because that was something that the early Flyers in a whole different time, in society, did very well. But if you go
always at the bar,
well, I was at the bar, but they were also always at the bar with the fan club. The fan club did all these parties and events at the Alpine Inn in Springfield and other places, and the players would hang out with the fan club, and so they got to be personal friends. I mean, a lot of people in the fan club, they would babysit the Flyers players, so they still weren't a good team yet.
Yeah,
but there was a bond there. Now again, that's a whole different time and era. That time will never come back. But what it did was, qualitatively, is what you're saying. There was a bond between fan and player, because they were able to identify the fans were able to identify, feel like they were their players, right? Their team. They were invested in it. That's something that so there's obviously a social media piece. There's what you do, Jason, where you're profiling players and getting to know them, beyond just what they're doing on the ice. I do think that Jonesy and Danny recognize that. And there have been steps taken towards building towards that. I think Talk understands that. I don't really think Torts understood that very well.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do think Talk understands that,
Yeah.
and so I do think there will be a higher level of access there. And again, winning comes along with it too. Being showing sign, these are guys that'll be here for a while and want to be here, and people that fans can gravitate towards as well. But I think building that connection is absolutely a piece of it, especially when you're still working on building a contender on the ice.
Yeah, the fans want to invest.
Yeah,
they want to invest in them beyond just the player. And if you look, hockey players are funny guys. I mean, good dudes, good people.
Yeah.
So I think it's a big part of it. The last thing I wrote, Bill, was just from an organizational and business standpoint. And this is something where the Flyers lost their compass. Always respect the customer, always respect the fans, empathize with them, and most importantly, hear them. Yeah. Listen to them, listen to their experiences, hear them, and make decisions based on your customers, your fans, the people that keep the lights on.
1,000% completely agree.
Yeah.
It's and it's not just saying we feel your pain, but it's listening to what people are saying.
Become an elixir for my pain.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you have to come up with ideas and solutions, and these things have to work out ultimately, because otherwise it sounds empty.
Yeah.
But I do think it's understanding what people are telling you, articulating it, and understanding that ultimately we all want the same thing. We all want to win, and I think that it's important to own up where you have to own up. Where you've made mistakes and where there's been a distance between the fans and the team, to where I also think it's also being very truthful about areas that were once really Flyers strongholds that are now either mixed or there's not the level of fan base there was at one time. I was discussing that with somebody from the organization actually just recently, where there are areas, say like in Bucks County, that it used to be just all Flyers country, or parts of New Jersey that once upon a time were Flyers country. Now you'll find a lot of Devils fans there. You'll find and I'm not saying we're just going to go back and take those areas, but understanding those areas that where there was once strength, it's not. I think you need to reconnect with those segments of the fan base, understanding where you have opportunities to grow your fan base again. I think that's part of the overarching strategy that any organization needs. And sometimes, Jason, it's not the easiest thing when you've had a lot of success, where you can sometimes take that success for granted, and then the success isn't there, and then you kind of scramble to get back. I do think that there is there's a plan there, and I do think, incidentally, that and it's something that Jonesy and Danny do very well, but then Dan Hilferty does well as well. You go to the training facility in Voorhees, and Dan Hilferty, as a matter of course, is always circulating there. Yeah. Always shaking hands, saying hello to people, just simple interactions, right?
Yeah.
Nothing
formal or anything. Yeah.
Nothing beyond that.
Very approachable.
You're never going to go back to the Ed Snyder years, but what did Ed Snyder do so well, other than, they did many things well, but one of the things that Ed Snyder and Joe Scott and that era did so well was they were out among the people. Ed Snyder would walk the concourse a lot, and just little things like that where you're visible, people can come up to you, and that in and of itself that's part of connecting, because it's other than saying that we hear you and we need more patience, but I do think sometimes just being there and just listening instead of talking.
Yeah,
I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, I do too, and I think it shows the fan base that you feel their pain, and we knew that with Ed Snyder without a question about it. So they can check those 5 boxes. We're in for a lot of fun, and I think that Chuck Fletcher, when he was here, I don't know if it was deemed above him or how the organizational structure was, but I felt like there was always desperation in his moves at times, and it wasn't. You got to feel really comfortable about your position to play the long game. You really do, as a general manager or decision maker within a pro sports organization. It doesn't mean you can't make mistakes, because I'll go back to Howie Roseman. He did. I mean, he made those 2 trades to move up to draft Carson Wentz #2, paid him one of the biggest contracts in the history of the NFL, and then had to basically have dead money, set a record for dead money on the cap. When they realized it was a mistake. You're going to make mistakes. It's how you deal with the mistakes along the way as well. One thing that would go a long way too, Bill, would be obviously, bringing in a very exciting player. Mishkov's here. He's incredibly exciting. I think, Trevor Ziegler is coming in. There's a lot of wow factor there with him. We'll see if there's a lot of stake along with the sizzle. That's going to be up to him. But, we had an episode where I talked about all roads lead to Kaprizov and the Russian connection. We've talked about that free agent class with Kaprizov, McDavid, and Eichel and others. But I had this kind of like epiphany the other day, and I don't know if it was an epiphany or not. But I was thinking about Quinn Hughes and amongst this crazy free agent class next summer, where you have McDavid, Eichel, and Kaprizov, and we'll see who actually makes it to free agency. But Quinn Hughes is going to be an RFA. And the long game says, well, this is a guy that played for Rick Tocchet, loved playing for Rick Tocchet, and is on the record as such. He's got 2 brothers that play in New Jersey. Fitting 3 brothers on one team is probably a stretch. But boy, it'd be easy on the parents if 2 of the kids played for New Jersey and 1 of the kids played for Philadelphia. And you go into a situation in an RFA for an offer sheet with them where you don't mind giving up 4 first-round picks because, A, you got the known commodity of one of the elite defensemen in the NHL, and B, the next 4 drafts, you're not predicting yourself to be drafting high in those anyway. So you go, you know what? I'll sign the monster offer sheet, and I'll check a box that's really hard to check. And when you look at Quinn Hughes in his last 4 years in the NHL, Bill, his last 304 games, he's got 312 points. That's the kind of guy you invest in a situation like that.
For sure. And you have to shape your roster too. I mean, it's going to take some guts, because there'll be some moves on there where you're maybe taking 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. But
Jonathan Huberdeau and Uyghur for Matthew Tkachuk.
Exactly where I was going with it. Where you make the bold move. Where I mean, in that case, you're sacrificing. Huberdeau was a 100-point guy.
He was a Hart Trophy finalist that year.
So you're sacrificing that, or going back to you mentioned the 95 team earlier. I mean, Mark Recchi set the Flyers point record. The next year, he had another 100-point year. Now the Flyers got incredibly lucky that John LeClaire was a 50-goal scorer waiting to happen, but really it was Eric Desjardins was really the reason why they made that trade. But you identify what you need and what you want to build around. And, maybe, I mean, I'm not saying you're going to get that kind of a bonus with it, but, we've talked too about how you want your blue line to look. I mean, if you're adding Quinn Hughes, you're going to have to restructure, but that's okay. That's okay if you can actually land the player.
Yeah.
So, that's a big part of it too. You look at what's a group you can win with, who's a guy you can build around, and then you would replace it. But I mean, I think you have to be bold at a certain point. You can't be afraid to make that bold move, and maybe it doesn't work out for you right away.
Yeah,
right.
I have to ask Rex about that when that trade was made, because before he comes back to Philadelphia later in his career, he played 84 games those last 2 seasons he was here each year. It was 84-game season, so he played 168 games in those 2 years. He had 93 goals, 137 assists for 230 points, and he was traded at 25.
Yeah.
It's not like he was 34.
No.
That is a gutsy move.
That was a very gutsy move to make, right? Well, after missing the playoffs 5 straight years. And the initial reaction, because I was driving the car when the initial reaction was extraordinarily negative. They didn't know who Eric Desjardins was. You know, they certainly didn't know Leclerc. I mean, you actually heard more stuff about Gilbert Dion. Well, at least it's Dion, right? And well, if you're going to trade Mark Recchi, why did you get Matthew Schneider? Why did you get Eric Desjardins? Right. Yeah. So it was just all negative. And the Flyers got shut out in the first game after it happened too.
Imagine Twitter at that time. If it was around
in the pre-Twitter age. Yeah. But I mean, that trade was panned 6 ways to Sunday, but it didn't take long, you know, for to realize, okay, well, we're on to something here. And it was awful losing Rex, and of course he did come back a couple years later. But that's an example of a bold move where you were trading a really damn good hockey player.
Yeah.
But it was in the interest of getting better as a team to add pieces you needed. And again, different era, different time, salary cap and whatnot. But the principle of it doesn't change.
Yeah. I gotta ask. We're gonna have to ask Rex about that.
Yeah.
Was he had to be stunned? I mean, he just put up 2 monster years at 25. He's like, I'm out of here. Like, what's going on? What'd I do? Unbelievable. Bill, great stuff. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyHotStove.com. And he'll be back next week. We'll be back Wednesday for another brand new episode of Flyers Daily.